Hey, welcome to the Fine Print, ladies and gentlemen. I'm your host, Caleb Teskey, with another great guest for you today. It's been a minute here since the last show, which was with another great guest, Yasha Khan, the co-founder of MCR Labs down in Massachusetts, who um, presented some fascinating data about what's going on in the world of cannabis lab testing here around the country. Really good stuff there with Yasha. Also, I want to thank Anthony Manitti from the Camden Apothecary down in New Jersey. We had a lively discussion about rescheduling and the implications of that, perhaps. And I will be following up with Anthony because that's going to be wild. And Lou Rinaldi, if you haven't checked out my interview with Lou, patient advocate down in Connecticut, doing some great research and holding the government accountable. And Jamie Toth, your data witch, just another great interview there. She also is involved in some of the same sort of data analysis that Yasha is doing, and just love what she's up to. And coming up, dude, my birthday is on Thursday. I'm turning 40 on Thursday, and last year I interviewed Derek Granai from Bushy Beard on his birthday, so I thought I'd return the favor this year, and we're gonna do my birthday interview with Derek, and I just ran into them at NECAN this weekend. Nice seeing everybody there. And then I'm going to be slowing down a little on the 30th. I'm going to have Evan Carlson. We had to back that one up, but he's working with Neck Broadband up here, trying to bring internet access to rural Vermonters. And then on July 7th, I'm going to be appearing on the radio show, the 5H show down in Warren with Amy Page. So keep a lookout for that. And I think that's all the homework that I got here. My guest today, I'm super excited for this one. Ran into her on the internet talking about some things that really resonated with me. She's got a great backstory. She's a cannabis farmer, a business founder, an author, an inventor, and well, let's just get into it. Please welcome AC Moon to the show. AC, thank you for being here today.
Thanks. Thanks. Nice to see you, man. I'm hoping you're having a good day.
It's hot, man. If I pass out during this, just keep talking.
Oh, goodness. That's never good. I'm up in Humboldt right now, so the temperature never goes above 75 here.
It's about 90 over here in Vermont. Anyway,
Oh,
before we do
goodness.
anything, yeah, it's super hot. But before we do anything serious, would you give us a quick 5-minute life story, please?
Oh, 5 minutes. Let me see if I can cram it in. So I was born off grid in the mountains of the Sierra Nevadas. My father was a vet. My mother was a forest ranger and firefighter who battled cancer. I ended up going out on the streets hustling at about the age of 13 as a second generation farmer. I immediately connected to everybody in the cannabis community and started hustling my little butt off. I ended up having a kid at a very young age, my son Chaos, when I was 17. And we went through some really bad abusive situations. And I relocated up to Northern California. And so I'm actually from here. So it was good to come home and it kind of saved me some grace. I started the first edibles company in 2001, Harvest Moon Munchie Company, and was working in the Proposition 215 era where we were all working as advocates, and opened my first dispensary down there. And then within the years, I started purchasing property throughout the Emerald Triangle and Northern California, working with several different advocacy groups to continue pushing the movement forward. And then, yeah, about 150 clubs later, I found that I was a little big for my britches and the wrong timing. If I had done that now, it would be a much different story, that's for sure. And ended up dealing with federal raids throughout those times of both my business and my home in 2009. The three-letter people that make me stutter ended up coming onto my land. Lots of choppers, lots of activity, and I was again federally raided in 2012. Because of that, I decided to change my entire outlook on how I was going to approach the industry. And I knew that I could only help the people and the patients if I like advanced myself. So I started patenting and inventing and managed to get my first federal patent on crop tops greenhouses with 21 micro patents claims underneath that, and then began traveling, learning manufacturing and patenting of genetics as I kept my genetics alive for about 19 years, and started working internationally and moved to Asia after my partner was indicted for growing during those federal raids. It took many years for them to actually incarcerate him. And so he spent 5 years down, and I tried to keep things going, but ended up working down in the Caribbean, helping in St. Vincent and the Grenadines, and then most recently in the Virgin Islands, where I am the first instructor of cannabis curriculum at University of Virgin Islands South. And I help teach at Oaksterdam University as well as write for several different magazines, including Dank Magazine and Weed World in London and Grow Magazine in Eugene, Oregon, and a couple of other really great publications while I'm trying to launch my kids' book, Magic Box of Wood, as well as helping build the first international weed network that we're going to be seeing here on TV soon. And I can't wait to be able to speak all the truths about that one. So this is going to be an amazing year. There's going to be a lot of great things going on. And that's about as fast as I could wrap that up.
That's cool. Now, what I'd like to do is pick some of that apart, please. And before we get, and the raids was really the thing where you caught my attention talking about that, because my dad was arrested in this big hash bust by the FBI when I was 7 years old. So that really resonated with me. But before we do that, I was interested in the advocacy work you did on Prop 215 back in Cali. Maybe we could talk about that first.
I was just a kid, I've been in this industry about 25 years now as an actual business owner, as a smoker myself since I was a teenager. Quite early compared to a lot of people in the city. And at first, I started working around the Bay Area, passing out flyers. So it was our job as the youth to walk around with, full on checkboards and actually go to people individually and say, do you support medical marijuana? And engage in the public on the streets of the Bay Area on how can we, make this pass. And I was really in admiration at the time of Jeff Jones, who I am blessed with now in my career to get to work with at Oaksterdam University. But he fought the feds before most of us and had the first cannabis dispensary and the first model working in the Bay Area. So I caught it and ventured into what is now known as the Oaksterdam area of Oakland and saw a lot of legendary people, including Dennis Barone and other legacy leaders trying to fight for it. My mom had cancer back home, and I got a lot of friends that were addicted to opiates and dealing with major chronic illness. So it became something that we fought for. So opening the first dispensary, we would just, we'd get rated or something by local entities. And we just, back then, we just changed the name and start opening another nonprofit, a couple of blocks down the road and just change the name. So it was constantly a game, I think, in the Bay Area until I moved to the Los Angeles area with Commerce. Just kind of dodging the bullet on that one. Years pass though, and you get a lot. Bad. For me, it was poorly timed. If I had these experiences at this point, 10 years later, it would have been different. But such as the follies of being the first in the game, right?
Somebody had to be.
Yeah, you take it, bad things happen to good people.
Facts.
So yeah, the state didn't really mess with us much after that. It was really around the mid early 2000s that the feds really started to pay attention in Northern California as a point of contact to what I believe is the true influence of cannabis society, I guess. And so that was always a bad one. Oh yeah.
And it sounds like you just segued into this other thing. And now you sent me the story in my email, and I read, and it's a long story. And I was hoping, well, it took me a while to read that, but I'm hoping maybe you'll walk us through some of that, because certainly one thing that I wanted from legalization was just for the cops to leave people alone, the feds to leave people alone, and especially, folks who have dealt with these raids. And I've interviewed a number of people that have been raided and felons and all kinds of things, but that sounded like an intense story. And I was hoping maybe you could just walk us through.
A lot of us dealt with a lot of intensity, and including, somebody I very much honor, which is John Casale at Huckleberry, who spent many years down in federal penitentiary for, being a pioneer in cannabis. And so I really like to pay homage to the people that were there before me. I'm in my 40s now, but the people that have been truly paving the way have, been there before us, and we're just walking in their steps to continue this. And so I absolutely have, no doubt that it's so hard to go online and publicly like speak these types of stories where, you know, there's a real sensationalism to hearing about the raids that we endured and the terror that was behind it. And it is a reality. It's something that we live as a PTSD. This isn't like something that we could just stick like on the movies and become Murder Mountain of Humboldt. Like we endure every day with our kids, choppers overhead, things that were very unfair to our commerce, like that we have been holding down the last free commerce nation, and everybody's been incarcerated. Even as I showed you in that one platform of just writing a chapter out, it was for me to help deal with my own PTSD, to just begin writing it out and going, don't be afraid to talk about it. Don't be afraid to talk about it. I actually on September 24th will be finally 10 years out of my last raid, which was 2014 in Trinity County, where the choppers came in and they had used federal wildlife, fish, and game, as well as fire departments, to block everybody off in an area which is called Trinity Pines in the Emerald Triangle. Emerald Triangle is Humboldt, Trinity, and Mendocino County. And it gets really deep out in the cuts, not in the woods. And that's how cannabis has gained so much traction out there, is because there's a lot of hiding spots and the trees protect us. And so they came in like straight paratrooping out into the farms, coming down rails out of the helicopters directly into farms with no way to get out, because they blocked off all the exits to the community where we all grew cannabis. And so in that community, you can see everything from Mexican mafia to Hmong mob to all sorts of different, flavors of humans all grew cannabis in harmony out in the woods. And it's true in many different small communities out in the in this home region. We're all just working together, and there isn't all this arguments and negative energy that they bring. It's all them. We're all working together over here. And so like the Murder Mountain shit, we do experience murder, we do experience violence, but it is nowhere as much as the city would, in the way of just on a daily thing. Most of the time it's the city people coming up and trying to rob the people in the woods, and that creates the violence. Hustlers get robbed, people get, pistol whipped or what have you, and it's real. But during the federal raid, that's where we really see the corruption on a different level, where the local cops will come in, and they often, they'll just take whatever the criminal or the person that they're pulling over or raiding or whatever, they'll just take whatever goods that they have and actually not, apply them to something that would be, illegal or illicit or going to court or anything like that. They just rob the people. And so we saw that in a lot of ways, where now we're seeing a lot more of the social media being able to have influence into holding different judicial departments, I think, responsible and accountable for how they've treated the people, how they've pistol whipped them, how during the Operation Green Sweep in Humboldt, way back in the day when I was a kid, they held people at gunpoint at AR-15s. Like kids were pulled out of the cars. Like my own uncle was held on the ground for 5 hours with an AR-15. And it's just over a plant. It's nobody's being violent in any way. It's just an outlandish over dramatization of whatever they thought that the farmers were doing. And so I'm really glad to see that the industry has gotten a chance to thrive for even a moment before rescheduling happens and big pharma gets an opportunity to, start governing standards and things that are going on. And I think a lot of change is happening. But those raids, I mean, I can't begin to tell all of the stories because there's so many raids. I've endured 3 federal raids and 6 county raids. and state raids. So it's hard to tell all of the stories. And like you saw at the end of that, it said this is just one of the chapters. And it's me like
Well,
trying to get it out, the fear when you have to sign over everything you own and prepare to go down for 5 to 10 years for just taking care of your community and taking care of the people that you believed in and fighting what you know is the right to have free herbal medicine and the people to grow their own instead of having to buy a pill to feel relief that is governed by some apolitical standard that is lobbied by huge commerce that we can't even begin to battle and barely understand on a normal level. So I continue to take a stand, but I'm glad things have had an opportunity to, we're speaking about it now and in these platforms and on YouTube and all over the world, podcasting and such, and soon a new TV network. So I mean, the world is on the edge of great change, and
mm,
I'm really stoked to see it.
oh yeah. Well, would you tell us? Um, I want to ask you about that one specifically that you wrote about, and just like I guess a good question would be, what do you do when the cops come, or when you see the helicopter coming down? What do you do?
That's a really hard one to answer.
Thank you.
Well, our kids are trained in the garden from years ago. My son Chaos was trained to get underneath the trees, get under cover, do anything that you can to get away from having your picture taken because they take photos of you from the air. And we don't have any rights to privacy from the air, and that can be included in Google Maps and everything else where you can visually see other people's doings. And it's been a problem for the industry a lot, as well as having public markers on record of where even legal farms are now, everything being public, it puts people at risk unnecessarily. So it's really hard to litigate it nowadays compared to back in the day when we had a little bit more freedom because there was less technology, and technology has really changed the game. I think definitely. For me, my first impulse is always to run, but that's because I'm from like the real grassroots, the real deep industry. I now am not afraid to stand, and I did stand during that raid, and that I wrote about and shared with you. I did stand there, but my partner, um, who a Karuk Indian said, fuck no, like let's go, and just grabbed me and was just like, all we could do is start running in order to evade the dogs and just get as far into the woods as we can to avoid them. And it gave me the opportunity to find, federal representation through Normal, which has always been a database that has been, leading the and helping the people and connecting them to the proper resources. So I was able to find a federal lawyer and commandeer that. Yeah, Normal. Bless up Normal, because
I
we're
just had
always.
Keith Strop on the show recently. That was another great interview. If you guys haven't seen that one, yeah. Sorry to
Oh,
interrupt.
absolutely. The work that they've done has been invaluable to making this a worldwide change, I think. And so once I was able to get a federal lawyer and kind of waited it out in the city where I was, less known, I was able to call and, at first they kind of sell you out. And if you get the wrong lawyer, they'll tell you to sell out because they're owned. And at first they'll say, just give it up. You're facing 5 years. There's no way they can get away with, there's all of these things. But after a couple more phone calls with the proper lawyer, all of a sudden, even though I had an FBI number, the it just disappears, and all of a sudden they don't mess with you. So a couple years later, you get in trouble again. They want to throw the book at you, and so it really depends on how and what position you're in. Now, at this point in my life, having dealt with all that, I feel very strong about standing up and having no problem just directly working with and alongside law enforcement and understanding that those are all individuals that are doing a job and they were trained to go after a plant, or those that worked with that plant because it wasn't taxed at the time. But now that it's taxed and those taxes are paying their dollars, there's a little bit more level of playing field to be able to work with law enforcement and different, legislative bodies are able to work together now. I think there's a lot more harmony because there doesn't have to be as much us against them. But when it comes to the federal level, unfortunately, it's very much still us against them in a lot of ways. And so we have to be cautious of that and just be aware that rescheduling is not descheduling and is not freeing the plant, and it's actually upraising some of the standardizations for the minimum sentencing. Our people will still be incarcerated underneath this rescheduling, and even more so because of the standards that have to be hit by medical law. And so it's going to change the game for all of us.
Well,
I
and
I worry about what we're going to see in the next 5 years.
let me butt in for a second too, because that conversation I had with Anthony Minetti, who owns a dispensary and pharmacy in New Jersey, was kind of eye-opening there. And it seems like, at least from the research I've done, that this might be the point where you're going to see all the pharmaceutical companies come in. Now they can do their research or tell you about the research they've really already been doing for quite some time. And
Absolutely.
I don't know if there's a question there, but yeah, I see exactly what you're talking about. And it's going to be interesting to watch this one play out here. Um, can I ask you something? Um, how have these raids affected your kids? I'm sure that must be a kind of a traumatic memory. Okay.
I actually just spoke to Chaos. My son's name is Chaos, and Chaos, growing up in the industry, never once wanted to be in it. And I taught him, always find another career. So he went on to go to college and embraces a really heavy career in being a mechanic. And he loves cars and working on motorcycles and doing these other things. And what I have asked him directly, like, I said, I'm sorry. I'm sorry for the decisions I made and how they affected you. Because I remember there being a certain time, we were both really young, so we kind of raised each other. And because I was such a young mother. And I remember one point in time, after all the fear of the raids and everything and having to be separated for long periods of time, because we had never been separated before that. He's my road dog. And I said, I'm sorry, and he said, Mom, I want you to quit. I said, that we'll probably lose everything if I quit. And everything that I worked for. And when I asked him now in his 20s, like how that feels to look back and knowing that like Mom didn't quit, even though, I did tone it down. I did change my career. I did my best to change my career. I've become very certified. I've gone to college and I've got everything from OSHA to CGMP to ISO certifications on my belt. In order to be a teacher, I had to learn though, and I had to slow down from the hustle and really learn. And now he says that he admires me, and I'm stoked when he says I would never change a thing in my life, Mom. Like I love the way that I grew up and the freedom that you gave me on 40 acres out in the middle of nowhere, regardless of everything else, was something I don't think a lot of people get a chance to. So he says
Awesome.
it was really stressful, because you have that fear. But as I wrote to you, the whole community, all the kids, they all had fear because during the raids, the federal agents came into our local school. They came in and they were fully armed and came into our local school. And so
They
all
went
of the
to
kids,
school?
the whole community, all of their parents like grew cannabis. Like everybody grew weed. It's not just me. It's my whole mountain. And so all the little kids like knew what that meant to have those soldiers in blue there, like looking for what was going on in the community. So as I wrote in that story, it definitely is a memory, but it's a memory that makes them not want to be in the weed industry because they don't have the glamour that everybody has from the outside of like, oh, you're a weed smoker. No. There's not all the hype attached to it with the Barbie dolls taking hits, trying to look cute. They know the reality. And I think most of our third generation farmers will just be home growers and they'll have respect for both sides and able to, function past that PTSD a little bit better than the elders.
And that's a great point you make, which is super relatable to me. I watched my dad get arrested on the Channel 3 news by the FBI. It's like, whoa. I didn't even realize like the significance of that until later. But then it's yeah. It's
Yeah, my
stressful. And I work.
partner at Rare Breed Genetics, he recently did a podcast with like Upper Bank Seabolt or something, and he recanted his story of, because he's born and raised in Humboldt as well, and he remembers the choppers coming down when he was going to the bathroom outside at 3 years old, and like it's one of his first memories of the choppers coming down, and the terror like stays with you forever because it's like war. But I mean, I don't want to say it in the way we have so much, and please honor to the Palestinians and everybody and the Syrians and the Africans and everybody that's at war in Korea and the whole world. But this war on drugs has also been on a war on our mind and our society, which has been predominantly poverty. I don't care what color you are or what nationality, it's been predominantly focused on poverty. And so those people that chose to go be homesteaders, their kids have been kind of tortured in a lot of ways because they don't fit, they don't get to go to all these functions, and like they just have to operate differently. Kids grow up only hanging out with other kids that whose parents are growers because that's how we keep, the circle tight. And so it just changes, I think, the experience of life, I think. But now it's different. And you see a lot of people just trying to enter for the opportunity and the experience, which I welcome that. I think it's
Mm.
great for new careers and people really interested getting into it. But just as long as you're real about the real fight that's still going on. It's not just a hype job. It's something we're dedicated to.
Mm. Guys, I'm here with AC Moon. If you're watching it, and shout out to Doc Ray too, who had some
Doc
lovely things to
Ray!
say.
Mwah!
Yeah.
I love you, Doc.
Um, Doc was on the show not too long ago. If you guys didn't see that one, that was a great interview there. Special Forces veteran. Um, and
He's so awesome.
and AZ, you touched on this earlier, but that was my next question: is after all of these raids, why didn't you stop? Or I'm sure you've gone over this in your own head, like after each one of these, like maybe I should stop, but like, why'd you keep going?
Well, for me, it's a catalyst of change. I believe in freedom, and for me, it's a flag. Our whole community and our whole society is literally like a flagship for being able to flagship freedom, because of the fact that international law is really governed by national law. So during the world wars, part of the treaty was written up that says that, you know, they can't involve themselves with the hemp plant. And so therefore Asia and other places such as Japan made it very illicit in their communities, which affected their entire history of what is now their present cannabis culture. And those were based on what is our precedence of law. They're following American law because they see that as king law amongst the world is, we're the trickles of the British Empire in whatever fashion we are. And so I think that in a way that now that we get to see the change that's happened, you can already see many nations like even Japan opening up that are so illicit before, they get a chance to finally enter the community and have, a breaking point of stigma and be able to have less violence towards their people that are working cannabis and violence towards their women in India, and kind of just even the playing field internationally. So I think I strayed from the subject, I'm sorry, but please bring me back
No,
on track.
I love a good tangent, AC. I'm gonna let you go. Yeah, I don't. I'll interrupt if I need to, but I love what you're
What
talking
really
about.
kept me going is my passion for that catalyst. That's what it is my passion for that catalyst. Is I'm a very creative person. I wish I could invent 1,000 things that could like change the world. I want to take water from the air and use solar non-lithium batteries in order to give, you know, clean water to like desert Sahara communities. I want to find a way to change the world. And I found that like you can't ever be afraid to reinvent yourself. And so every time I've reinvented myself into an author and an illustrator, an international consultant, I've built my portfolio and my own intellectual property so deeply that all I can do is offer it to the world. Like I have a passion for learning. And so then I would like to be a catalyst and help other people use this plant to be a catalyst of change. We can, instate organic practices. We can use the entire hype around cannabis to direct that hype towards positive change and a connective unity that's real, that we never had the ability to do before. Like, social media itself is so crazy powerful. Like, people don't even watch the news anymore. They just watch social media and what their own little circle is doing. So if we can have that effect, I don't care how many times I would face indictment. I just want to find a way for us all to just open our eyes and kind of get more clarity. And you don't need to do shrooms or anything. You just need to set down the fucking phone and like pay attention to a tree and like watch an ant walk and realize that ant has its own little world too. And like the whole world is lots of little tiny worlds, and just all this beautiful connectivity that I could get super cheesy about, but I won't. But it's real. And cannabis, if we do it right, can be a catalyst for great change. And I think that is just a stepping stone for us to be able to connect our minds and like really unify a message to the world.
Hmm.
That's pretty much
And
what I feel.
word up to my dudes at the Ant Hill Collective here in Vermont. Bunch of great artists. That bear right there was done by one of them. Great guys. Yep.
That's
Cool.
excellent.
Yeah, I love those guys. Scotty. Yeah. So you did boy, it's like you're doing some of my segues here for me, but some of the environmental concerns is stuff that I've looked a lot at. And when I'm not looking at weed research, I have looked at a lot of chemical companies. And I know the pesticide stuff is just a super hot story right here in Vermont now, but I'm curious to hear your thoughts on, and even stuff like the water usage. I know in Cali, there was a lot of people like,
Yeah. I
they're
work in a lot of Caribbean islands where water usage is a huge problem as well, because there's no wells. It's only from water collected from storm drain offs and such like that. So hold on, proper prep.
I'm here
So
with AC Moon, guys. Yeah.
so what I would say is there's many different ways to attack these like toxins in cannabis conversations, because first you have to realize that most fertilizer companies were created by the same people that owned gas, oil, and big pharma. Like the largest fertilizer companies, a lot of the fertilizers were created because they needed a place to dump the leftover biochemicals that were not able to, we had nowhere to put them in the world. And a lot of it was from petroleum products. And so they created fertilizer companies and started pushing it on andicides and all sorts of major toxins. So to this day, this is still true. This is not a falsity. You can study on it. The basis of fertilizer companies are the same places where the basis of pharmaceuticals and gas and oil, which are the same investor bases. And so when you look at that, you also look at pesticides, which is along the same thing of being monopolized or governized by, or decentralized truly by things as large as Monsanto and Bayer Pharmaceuticals, where they can proliferate these crops being governed by that. And really, what GMO, the fire about GMO was the fact that they're on a DNA and cellular level embedding Roundup into the cells, basically an inhibitor of that uptake, so that they can round up everything else and it will die, but that one particular species will stay alive. So they're mutating it. And that's why we worry about GMO. But there's other type of GMO that were created to make a strawberry plant create 17 strawberries when it only created 4. So there's different types of genetic modifications that have gone on in order to credulate the conversation. But when you look at pesticides in specifically, if you don't have organic controls and aren't using integrative pest management methods or theories, you are definitely part of the problem. And I mean, the benzoines and the super hard chemical toxins that are going on, if you were to just walk outside with any of them and then just spray them on anything, spray them on a creature if you want to be that torturous, but look for yourself what it does. Many of these pesticides cause paralysis in fish. If it gets into the waterways, they cannot reproduce. Like And when we get in this concentrative factor of cannabis all of a sudden being able to be part of the problem instead of part of the solution, is where we have to really consider the fact of how we're farming and how that's going to affect the entire cycle, because all of these cellular toxins get into our body and they cause cancer. And then we use cannabis to fight cancer. All of a sudden we're creating this super toxic cycle of where we're like, dude, why would you want to farm with something that's going to cause what you're farming to cure? What just happened right now? It's an oxymoron of creation. So we have to break that away to become extremely conscious and use social media and other platforms in order to put the heat on that organic methods, organic controls, such as organic integrative pest management controls, which are biological controls that work in symbiosis with the environment, such as regenerative cannabis farming. Most large industrial places can't farm like that, and we do understand that. But you can at least focus on organic to some extent. I mean, Doritos couldn't have an organic flavor out on the shelf if they couldn't buy 48% organic. So we don't just want a label that says, oh, you have 48%. We want an actual, you're doing so much damn testing anyways. I mean, make it good. I mean, for God's sakes, just have some morality in it and know your farmer.
Well, and I want to interject here because that's the thing. It's like cannabis is the thing that can allegedly help cure cancer, and then you're going to spray it with some shit that maybe causes cancer, and which is yeah,
it's a secular sickness that, I mean, you can't just call it the chronic cycle. It's like a super chronic cycle that is so deafening, because just like when you poison a mouse in your house, that mouse goes outside the house and is eaten by an owl. That owl is then eaten by a cat. That cat is then eaten by the next thing. And it goes on until the decomposing waste in the body just, it becomes one with earth, and the toxics are only absorbed by the bionutrients and the microorganisms that are in the soils. So if those
that
aren't filtered in the soils, yeah, we don't have a cycle to filter it out.
bioaccumulation. Is that what that's called? Sorry. Yeah, sorry.
No, totally that. And then all of a sudden we don't have anything to remediate or filter out the problem, and then we're just eating our problem, like in all ways, in cannabis and food and water and everything.
And that's something I've also talked to people about, is this, they say, oh, cannabis is a great remediator. It'll suck up heavy metals and shit like that. And it's like, okay, well, once it's sucked it up, what do you do with it? Right. Where does that go?
You have to compost it so it becomes back in, absorbed through the microbiomes. So once you compost it, otherwise I tell people to light it on fire, because the only thing that can absorb it is atmospheric moisture. But then again, that atmospheric moisture goes into the water cycle of going through the clouds, dumping down into the earth, draining through the soil, collecting back through, becoming evaporated, and then going back up to the clouds. And it's the same circular fashion, and all of it still relies on the filtration of the soil. So if you kill your soil base, or you're growing in soil that's not alive, I mean, it's part of a toxic cycle, in my opinion. So I do my best to just regenerative.
Well, it seems like that's what the chemical fertilizer industry has done, is just like poison the soil. And these I think are leftover sort of Nazi chemicals, Bay or stuff like that. It came from World War II. They made explosives with some of them. Yeah. Which is disturbing, and it's creating super pests, from what I understand, that are now resistant to the chemicals.
Absolutely. I've seen myself in my own personal research, both in the tropics and or actually Asia as well as North America, in 3 different spots, including New Jersey, where we're applying just a basic organic fertilizer or pesticide on that as a control method that was organic. And within only 2 applications, the insects were able to mutate like that, so that they were not as deterred from it as would be originated. And in the Caribbean, they completely ignored the chemical control, the biochemical control, after just 2 applications. So I think we disregard the fact that insects and bacteria and fungus are both evolving much more rapidly than our practices are.
No argument there.
Yeah, I mean, I try to remind everybody, everything is evolving just as fast as we've always evolved. Sorry, I have to plug this thing in. And we can't stop evolving just from this, concept that, sorry. We can't stop evolving or believing that everything around us is evolving. Just because we have tech now doesn't mean everything's still, moving forward in the, normal range of evolution we've always seen.
Some of it does seem to be speeding up a little faster than humans are evolving, but yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. I this morning saw an elk play soccer with a kid, so I was like, yeah, we're evolving still.
I want to ask you a little bit about, I want to thank you for sharing the stories too about the raids. I'm sure that's not super fun. But I want to,
it does bring a little bit of a heartbeat raise for sure. It makes me reach for the bong. Deal with anxiety well? I don't know. Cannabis.
Well, when I see blue lights, I also have a mini heart attack every time. So even if they're not coming for me, it makes me a little nervous.
Here in Humboldt, we still deal with choppers over us every day.
I want to ask you a little bit. I want to transition a little bit into some of what you're doing now. And I feel like you mentioned it on the phone about some of the greenhouse crop tops, something like that. Yeah. Will you tell us a little bit about that, please?
Yeah, crop tops. That was my first invention. I got my patent on, I think, in 2016 finally, with 21 microclims underneath it. So crop tops greenhouse is an instant pop-up portable greenhouse that protects plants from storms. And I originally invented it out off grid, where I'd have a whole bunch of plants outside of the greenhouses or my dep houses and stuff, and they'd always get rained on, and I'd get broken buds and lower quality weed, because when cannabis is exposed to water, it oxidizes faster and actually biodegrades faster. And so I learned very quickly to preserve my trichrome quality and everything else that I wanted to emulate the greenhouse. So I created an umbrella formed greenhouse that's portable, so you can use it in permaculture or fruit trees or cannabis, obviously. And so it starts at ground level with this little dome that is 9.4 mil polywoven plastic from professional greenhouse grade. And the telescoping pole telescopes it up to about 9 feet, and it has an attachable skirt that goes all the way around it. And cannabis breeders are now using it for pollination projects to make sure that they have a solid area where pollinating is, crossbreeding is not possible, and quarantines for research or plant tissue culture, as well as what I said, which was pest management, using it as fogging containers, isolation, and storm control. So then on the off season, a lot of people use it for their veggie farms, and I've even had people use it as a shower off grid. And my son used it to work on a motorcycle a few times, and it's super nifty. So it's about 9.5 pounds. And I originally did it so you could just haul it out. It's perfect for over a 200-gallon smart pot, big up smart pot legacy brand. And so that was always really cool to just be able to invent. So I was able to get evidence that I was the proprietor of 21 of the applications underneath it. So I was granted the micro patents by the examiners: telescoping pole, Velcro vent, meshed internal sides, and the whole utility patent. So pretty stoked on that. That was a cool project, and I can't wait to afford to be able to invent more. So depot top's coming, where we're going to be able to have the blackout cover, and you can manipulate your plant lighting at one plant at a time if you want.
Now that you mentioned that, I assume maybe since you had so much experience, I've asked a few people this question, but some of the old school guys were using the high pressure sodium lights and the metal halide. and now it seems like it's mostly LEDs. Do you have any thoughts on that?
I mean, it's different strokes for different folks, right? What is really important about LEDs is the cost efficiency. I've spent many, if not decades of time spending way too much money on generators and other super just high-end, gnarly power bills for all of the high pressure sodiums, metal halides. I mean, back in the day, we even had like sodium saturated mercury filaments. I mean, we've gone through all of the cycles of tubes to, bandwidth ballast to like full, spectral. But that's part of the problem with LED doesn't give a spectral, like, it doesn't give, I'm trying to think of it's the flow. I'm trying to think of the word for it, but is actually an outward cants of megahertz of the light spectrum that is going outward, while all of the traditional old lighting was able to give much more broader, space of casting out light. And then also, if you're in cold climates, LEDs don't push out, heat or emulate the sun in the same way because it's very cool comparatively. So some places now have to add heat when before they didn't, but yet it's still more cost effective. In the LED situation, I think it's interesting because it is governed completely by the Asian government and the way that they create the diodes through the doping mechanism. They actually dope in elements that are and it's actually called doping in the creation of LEDs, where they grow the LEDs by piling on these different minerals to create them. So I don't think it's very efficient in the end, but the creation of most anything in those types of innovations are going to be not very environmentally friendly, I think. But I mean, in a sense, being able to have a full spectrum light at your decision that is low heat for all my people in the tropics, it's 100% the way to go because we're battling heat and humidity, which is a real bad problem, as well as power problems where we do not have power available for traditional lighting. And for me, I now have 250 or something different metal halide 1,000-watt systems that I don't even know what to do with. And it's a problem for all of us because we have nowhere to put them. Like, unless you go into like tweak mode and start just disabling all of these perfectly working ballast and removing the copper coils, there is no way. You have to pay to recycle just hundreds and hundreds of extremely heavy ballast, which I really don't know what's going to happen with that. But we have a lot of them in especially Northern California, where I'm like, nobody knows what to do with. We're over innovating, but yet we need the innovation to save the power, but we're just innovating more shit. And I don't want to innovate to the point of where we're just filling landfills. We could still use the old ballast, just, tuck in an LED into it, and then it will give the reflective lighting of it. Like think about taking two innovations and combining them. So a lot of those reflectors will assist in being able to do a more reflective flow because the LED panels are flat. They don't have the curve that you would see in an HPS that would cause a globular light effect. So just put one underneath a reflector and just be more innovative with your space. But I think that there'll be a good replacement and definitely work best on solar systems for all of us off-gridders. That's for sure.
Well, and an interesting story that I read was from MJ Biz, and I'm trying to pull it up. I can't find it, but I think it was Hawthorne. They dumped like $200 million of lights into a landfill because they couldn't sell them. And that was from a story from MJ Biz. I will pull it up later.
I think it's just absolutely horrific that they do that when there is so many people in the world that just would I'm not going to be cliche and say Africa, but there's many countries throughout Asia and other places that they could have donated those lights to that would have been beneficial. That I know personally, I've taken donation for volcano eruptions, and many countries have destructive things. I think it's laziness of corporation. If you're going to dump that much waste of innovation into a landfill, you suck.
Yep. Well said. Thank you. And I said the exact same thing. Give those to businesses that are on the come up, we don't have room to store them in our inventory. Okay, give them to someone who does. Instead, you're going to throw that in a landfill. That just really kind of grinds my gears.
They would get even better tax exemption by donating it to charity instead of taking it as a loss. I mean, it was a poor accounting as well.
And they would also build some goodwill in the community, which seems like a win-win there.
Absolutely. And people even think that, oh, a year or two, it's too old. No, like stop over inventing, over innovating. Stop being so trendy that you can't use something that's 3 freaking years old. If it works well, it's efficient, then use the damn thing. Stop being so freaking trendy. Like fast fashion is just about as bad as fast weed growing. Like, don't buy a whole bunch of plastic stuff. Like, buy stuff that's built to last.
Hmm. I got a couple more for you. I'm here with the HC Moon guys, and if you are interested in this type of conversation, boy, I got a couple more coming up too that I keep under my hat. This is fantastic. I want to ask you too about being a woman in the cannabis industry. This is something that is a hot topic, I know, and along with the sort of the social equity stuff. But I'd like to hear your opinion on that because I've heard a number of others, and you seem like a great person to ask this question to.
Oh, being a woman in cannabis is so fun. No, really, I don't mind it at all. I've worked in a male-dominated industry for my entire life, so I'm not really too worried about it for myself, but I am a stronger voice than a lot of people. And I try to tell the women that I'm influential too, or try to speak to them. And consulting, you got to have a little bit of a thick skin. And if you can't have a thick skin, then, if you can't take the heat, get out of the kitchen kind of thing. Well, it's real. And so I really like to talk to people about it doesn't matter what sex you are, you need to have emotional intelligence when you're in the game or the corporate game. Like emotional intelligence is completely adaptable in every way to doing business. And it doesn't matter if you're a male or a female, you got to have just respect for your fellow human. And if you're going to see another person as a sex instead of a human that has a mind and is at a creative will of expressing themselves, then you're not really listening to them. You're busy judging them, and you need to listen and interact in a way that is meaningful for development between you two as humans. So yeah, being a female, there's been a lot of stigmas, a lot of prejudice. I've had to work extra hard to validate myself, and have really, I've had to go to Thailand and learn Muay Thai fighting, and have had to make sure that every time that I felt like a victim, I wasn't a victim, because it doesn't matter if somebody's going to be an asshole or a rapist or somebody that is a woman beater or any of these other things. The fact is that when you believe in something, it doesn't matter your sex, it doesn't matter your age. If you just have passion for something, everything else is takes all the bullshit takes a back seat to, just believing that you can do something. And so I try to just remember I could believe, how to do shit instead of, I don't know. I don't get that high though. Everybody else seems to get super high. I literally can smoke a horse under the table.
And some of the last one, well, some of the last one, I want to ask you about your teaching a little, and you said you were, oh, I had the notes there, right? But like Virgin Islands, I think you said. Um,
Yeah, we
yeah,
we got done. Dr. Suzanne McGrath from Virgin Island University, Sal, was gracious enough to be the first brave woman to bring me in to build the first Cannabis Commerce curriculum course, which is the introduction course, where we built an entire book as well as supplied the newest regulations. And we have speakers like Tim Blake, the founder of the Emerald Cup, and very influential people, and like
I
Miss
talked to Tim.
Walker. Yeah, he's great. Miss Walker of that is the legal authority for the OCR in the Virgin Islands. And Hugh Walker and the other people will come in, and we're going to try to steer these students towards, being the very first entrepreneurs in the legal commerce of the Virgin Islands, which is super, super important. really focusing on equity and making sure that it's not like a white owned entity, or that it is us just helping give advice and educating on how it can be done and how we can do it efficiently for them and make it work on the islands for the people of the islands and keep the power for them. So I'm stoked to have UVI Cell, bringing me to the table for that. And then we have a 6-week course, where it would be twice a week. I think it's 90 minutes a day or something for the first inaugural students of the Virgin Islands. So I'm super stoked for them. And then every Friday, I'm part of Hort Lab with Oaksterdam University, partnered with Jeff Jones, the founder of Oaksterdam, where we just talk about all the students that want to come into Hort Lab that are part of Oaksterdam. We just open our forum up, and like anything that you want to discuss with people that have been, working with cannabis, for him over 30 years, for me over 25. And so we sit there in the gardens and we just, talk plants, like, hey, what's up, love it? And so it's a lot of fun. I do enjoy it.
One more topic for you, AC, here before we get out of here is the packaging stuff.
Mm-hmm.
This has been a hot topic in Vermont. I know we talked about this on the phone, I think the first time we talked, but I'd love to hear your thoughts on this. It seems like there's been a lot of talk about protecting the environment. And for example, here in Vermont, one of the rules is like every pre-roll has to go in a glass tube, and all of these glass tubes come from China, which is something I've thought a lot about. But yeah, I'd love to hear your thoughts, please.
Yeah, it's not really efficient. We definitely need to make different parameters for international, safety. But the fact that they're letting you use glass is a lot better because you can grind it up than plastic. Plastic is something that we're just adding to landfills. People want to make hemp plastic, and hemp plastic lasts even longer. And so we need to use actually polymer breakdown plastics, such as Coca-Cola has tried to use, where it's the bio waste breaks down faster. But that's hard because if you store something for too long, you don't want it to degrade. So it's a real like fine line how we're like innovating the sector. And I really encourage people to continue thinking about it. And for me, I think it should be hemp paper that is waxed, and the hemp paper waxed attachment points should be, of course, secured with small bits of, aluminum or recyclable metal pin or circular point. And we should deduce all of this waste that's going on from international, working of packaging. Plus, the amount of proliferated IP infringing because of it is crazy. Like, I've never seen so many labels and brands completely like just sabotaged due to international bastard packaging. I don't know. I don't want to say that too harshly.
Guys, I'm here with HC Moon, and I think that's about the last question I have. However, and thank you for being here. This has been a fantastic
Thanks for
talk.
having me. Yeah.
My pleasure. But before I leave, and I'm going to bring myself back up, I want to ask
There
you.
you are.
It's me. It's so hot in here. I'm dying. But if we missed anything, or if you have any shameless plugs or shout outs that you want to give, I'd like to leave. Yeah, go ahead right now. Yeah, my pleasure.
Looking forward to the launch of Budtown, which is my 3D animated cartoon that will be seen soon, coming on our new weed channel that I will share to you as soon as we have an app that we're going to be on Xbox, ITV, like every single platform that you can think of. We're going to be right next to the Food Network and the Discovery Channel. It's going to be awesome. So look for Budtown Comics. That's going to be awesome. And if you enjoy kids and sustainable like literature, look for my book. It will be Magic Blocks of Wood, and it's a rhythmic tale about hemp and sustainability for your kids with some good games for adults. And I'm at AC Moon, Indica Innovations International, and I look forward to helping any entrepreneurs that look forward to reinventing themselves.
Pleasure speaking with you. I'm going to sign it off. This is AC Moon. Thank you so much for your time. I'm Caleb Teskey. Yeah, I'm Caleb Teskey with the Fine Print. And remember, the devil is in the details, and the details are in the fine print.